Well, fracking lets us know how absolutely hell-bent on destroying everything they are, because now they're destroying their own water supply. They're not even like destroying water supplies of brown people in another country. It's extraordinary. Yeah, it's extraordinary. I want to go back, and this actually has to do with both years. There's an organization I want to mention called, what the hell is it called? CELDF, I think. Thomas Lindsay. I love Thomas Lindsay. I want to tell you a quick Thomas Lindsay story, which is that he's one of the people, in fact, you might contact, you know Thomas Lindsay?
Yeah. In fact, we may be doing democracy schools here in Michigan.
Oh, great.
Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, and we're also looking into local bans. So please look at our
Yeah, Thomas Lindsay's fabulous. And Thomas Lindsay is one of the people who is behind, like the townships in Pennsylvania that have stopped, like they passed resolutions saying that you can't have corporate hog farms, or you can't, but he's the one who was behind, he's behind a lot of those. And he's behind a lot of the ones that, like when Pittsburgh banned fracking, he was behind that. And they had, was it Bolivia that has the rights of nature? He helped write that. Is it Bolivia or Ecuador? Bolivia? Okay, he helped write that. Anyway, the point is that I asked him, this is so great, I love this. These townships will ban fracking, ban corporate hog farms, whatever, ban Walmart. And I asked him, so of course, that the state and federal constitutions the feds reserve the right to, the U.S. Constitution reserves the right to regulate commerce to itself. And so that all these bans that you pass are going to be overturned at the state and federal level, at the Supreme Court. So if that's the case, why are you bothering to do any of this? And he said, because when people come to me, or when they, not me, because he's always us, it's like when people come to us, they still believe we live in a democracy. And they believe that a community should be able to determine the health of their water or the health of their economy. And so I say, great, I will help give you the tools to institute that democracy. And then they do it, and they do the work, and then they get squashed by the state or federal government. He said, you want to find a really good way to build revolutionary cadres? You get people who believe we live in a democracy, and you actually have them use the tools of democracy and get fucked. And then the other thing I want to say about fracking is that we live, actually, in many ways, at a really, really good and important time. And one of the reasons I say that is because there's a line by David Brower that's really true, which is, as an environmentalist, all of our victories are temporary and all of our losses are permanent. And that's been true for a long time, but with the collapse of capitalism, it's not true anymore. And at this point, if we can hold them off for a couple of years, in 2007, I think it was, the people in my neighborhood stopped a developer, so-called, killer, from destroying part of the forest where we live. And all we were doing is trying to hold him off. And then along came 2008 and the collapse of the housing market, and they had this stuff built. So it is very, very possible. At this point, for years, so many environmentalists have been holding on by our fingernails, just delaying. But at this point, it is very possible that some of our victories could become permanent, because, if somebody would have taken out a big dam back in the 1950s, they would have rebuilt it. Right now, they don't even have the money to maintain roads. They can't rebuild at this point. And this is true for so many things. Anything we can put off now might just be permanent. And then, there's one more thing I was going to say about that. Oh yeah. The single biggest recruiting tool for the French resistance in World War II was the realization, starting at about 42, that the Nazis might lose. And that they weren't invincible. And 15 years ago, it seemed like capitalism was a juggernaut that could not be stopped. But Bernie Madoff really helped show that that's not true. And peak oil is going to show us that as time goes on, this whole system is going to become more and more rickety, and there's going to be more and more people jumping on. So this is very, very good news.
I just was wanted to comment about the permaculture thing for a second about how can you be a permaculturalist or even have a garden and not fight Monsanto, for example, or like trying to have organic vegetables, for example. So that is just a point I wanted to add to that. But I have an example from DPS, Detroit Public Schools, because I'm an educator locally and I appreciate your topic. But Wayne State supposedly just came up with a policy whereby anyone from the Detroit Public Schools, they look at their grade point average and deduct 1 point from their grade point average. If they went to a charter school, supposedly, it's okay. So it's an attack on the public school system to privatize education, and it's also racist and classist. Just thought that would be interesting to add to your examples of the power structures of education.
The only coherent response I have at all is fuck them. That's really horrible.
Yeah.
I don't.
And the teachers at Wayne State are urging students to go on the streets and resist it, basically. And
so in other words, the teachers are a bunch of communists. That's terrible. I mean, I hate to say that that's terrible. Thank you for telling me. It's horrible. Yeah. That's one of the things that just kills me is the impunity with which these people act. I mean, that's just. I mean, of course, once again, African Americans like, yeah, there's this thing called slavery. Yeah, that's really messed up. There's a local charter school where I live, an itty-bitty community. I basically live in Tea Party County, and there's a local charter school that basically they're doing everything wrong. They're like, any standardized tests are bullshit, but we'll go with it for a second. I mean, they fail, and they're terrible on the standardized tests, they do everything, and all the Tea Party people, all the local Board of Soups, keep making every excuse, and the Board of Education keep making every excuse for this damn thing to continue, whereas if this were a public school, none of this shit would be allowed to happen at all. Because it's outrageous how terrible this religious right-wing charter school is. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm preaching the converted here, it's really, really ridiculous.
I also have a newspaper article where it says when Governor Snyder was inducted that the reason that there's no bullying, anti-bullying law in the state of Michigan is because the far-right religious minority who are voters don't want their kids to get in trouble for bullying gay teens. So that's another problem.
Wow, and that's really interesting, actually, that what you have then is basically this minority group is actually bullying the state into not allowing anti-bullying law.
Paradox.
I think pattern.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Take this one last one.
Okay, last question.
Hi, Derrick.
So no pressure, but make it like this, like the end of Beethoven's Ninth.
I'll do it. Thank you for giving me a couple hours where I'm not the craziest person in the room. I appreciate that. So I want to push you a little bit on your idea that reform and revolution are good, and what you mean by reform, because presumably you don't mean that one way to help things is to buy a Prius. Because when you buy a Prius, you're freeing up more oil for the military to use, and you're feeling good about yourself, so you don't have to do anything else, sort of a clean hands ethic.
Okay,
so I don't think that's what
there for a second?
Yeah, sure.
And before, do you have more in your question?
No, I just mean that I don't think that's what you mean by reform.
But I would call that lifestyleism.
Yeah.
Wait, did you have more?
So what kind of reforms would you count as being actual reforms to go with revolution?
Permaculture. Or one of my heroes, Thomas Lindsay is working within the system to set up the conditions for a revolutionary movement, really. I would count Thomas Lindsay. One of my heroes is a woman by the name of Sharon Duggan, who is a lawyer in California, and she has argued before the state Supreme Court. She only works within the system. She recognizes the system is entirely set up to serve production, recognizes the government occupation, recognizes all this stuff, and the tool she chooses to use is the law. And she has saved more land more forest in California than anybody else I know, more than, any, not that this anarchist here, more than any anarchist, more than any other activist I know of at all. So that would be, there's a military strategy that Army of Northern Virginia used at the Battle of Chancellorsville called Hammer and Anvil. And what that was is Lee broke his army in two and left one corps here and sent Stonewall Jackson with the other corps around like that to smash and to hit the enemy from the rear. And in order to have a hammer and anvil work, you have to have one doing offense and one doing defense. And I perceive the reform people as basically doing defensive work. And I perceive people who would be doing more aggressive actions as being the hammer. Or another way to put this, remember I said earlier that 2% of the IRA ever picked up weapons. And before the IRA, in the 19th century, there was the Gaelic literature revival, and that was Maud Gunn and a whole bunch of other people are reviving the Gaelic language and reviving their own literature. And those aren't revolutionary acts at all. At the same time, she's doing prisoner support work. And they also formed, I don't remember what they're called, like the Youth Sports League or the Gaelic Youth Sports League or something. You ever seen the movie, The Wind That Shakes the Barley?
Hurling.
At the beginning of the movie. You know why they did that? Because, in the movie, is because the Gaelic Youth Sports League, or whatever they're called, was the immediate predecessor of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, which was an armed resistance movement. And what they did is they rekindled their native sports and their pride in being Irish. And also they were learning strategy, they were learning how to get together, and also this is a way you can get together under the eyes of the British without suspicion being brought up. And so those aren't revolutionary acts in themselves. And so far as your question on personal stuff, I think the most important line I'm going to say tonight is one that I'm going to say now, and it's actually not my line, it's a friend of mine, Lear Keith's. And that's, I'll say this twice. The task of an activist is not to navigate systems of repressive authority with as much personal integrity as possible. The task of an activist is to take down systems of repressive authority. The task of an activist is not to navigate systems of repressive authority with as much integrity as possible. The task of an activist is to take down systems of repressive authority. And lifestyleism, as such, is a huge and horrible dead end that environmentalism has gone down. And it's very harmful. And it serves capitalism in many ways, one of which is that capitalism wants for us to be atomized. But there are no personal solutions to social problems. And capitalism teaches us there are. And also, the 1980s were the first time that corporate newspapers called human beings consumers more than it called them citizens. And that's huge, because if they can convince us that we are consumers and not citizens, it reduces our range of possible resistance actions. If you're a consumer, you can buy or not buy. If you're a citizen, you can buy or not buy, or you can organize to boycott, you can organize for a bunch of other reasons, or when a government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. You can revolt. And there's another transformation that's taken place that's just as wrenching, which was a few thousand years ago, when we were converted from human animals who need community and who need habitat into citizens. And one of the exchanges that sociologists generally agree happens when you become a citizen is you grant the state a monopoly on violence. But we are human animals who have teeth and have claws, and we have relatives who are being killed. And so one of the things we need to do in decolonizing is to move back and back and back through that, retransform back from being consumers to citizens, and from citizens to human animals who need habitat. And a couple things real quickly, I should have ended on that because that's really stirring, but a couple other things about the whole consumerism thing is one is simply ineffective. That I did the math on this several years ago, actually Eric McBay and I did the math, that if you reduce your trash consumption until it's zero, so you produce zero trash, the average person in the United States produces about 2,600 pounds of trash a year. So you reduce it to zero. You know, you wear your tennis shoes until they fall off, you repair your toaster, you don't buy anything that has any packaging, blah, 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 okay? Reduce to zero. Bad news. The average per capita trash production in the United States is actually 26 tons. 97% is by industry. So it's all, you know, those magic tricks where look over here, and the real action's over here. That's what's happening, is they're getting you to focus on, I gotta reduce my trash, when that's 3% of the whole pie. Same with water, they say, you know, shorter showers, gotta take shorter showers, it's gonna save the world's running out of water. Fucking bullshit, you know? Human beings, okay, 90% of the water used by human beings is used for agriculture and industry. Only 10% is used by human beings. Human beings in cities, municipal human beings, use the same amount of water as municipal golf courses. If you take shorter showers, all it's going to do is wreck your social life. It's completely irrelevant to social change. And that's a dead end we need to not go down. We need to organize, and we need to take down the oppressive systems. Okay, thank you.